Welcome to the maintenance of fire protection systems for Widget International, Victoria Jacobs. My name is Rodney Ashmore. I'm presenting this for EKU, Fire Safety 221. We've been asked to make a presentation on the maintenance and the testing inspections for the fire protection systems for Widget International, and this is what I've come up with. The wet sprinkler systems, per NFPA 25, Section 13 has a table where it lists all of the inspections of the quarterly, weekly, monthly, annually, semi-annually testings, which I've got listed here. As you can see, there's inspections from the alarm valves all the way through the check valves, control valves, dry pipe valves, and whatnot. And it actually references the chapters that you can look into to get to this inspection and testing relevance. The sprinkler weekly inspections. Now, for this facility, we have all control valves expected to be visually inspected and ensure that they are accessible in the normal open position, properly sealed, locked, and supervised, free from any external leaks, provided with signage. All of these are NFPA 25 guidelines. Gauges on wet pipe systems need to be visually inspected monthly. They need to be verified they're in good condition and there's no normal, or that they have normal water pressure that is being maintained. Gauges that are on the dry pre-action and deluge systems need to be visually inspected weekly. They need to make sure that everything's maintained and uh, available in case of emergencies. We're going to verify in the high bay areas that all the excess air is removed. The excess air in the system creates rot and issues for the system to have problems down the line. So by opening up the top of these pipes, we're going to remove all that excess air and stop wear and tear from happening. And then drum drips are drained and tested regularly. And to do this, all the drum drips in the system will have two valves, an upper and a lower. And the upper valve will then be closed. The lower valve will be open to release all the leakage from the system. Make sure that it's clean, debris is out. Close that bottom valve again, open up the primary, and that way the system's back into operation. Sprinkler quarterly inspections and tests. We want to inspect the water flow alarm devices. We want to inspect the fire department connections. And in these connections, there's several things in FPA 25 that we want to go ahead and bring up. Make sure that they're visible and accessible. That the couplings and swivels are not damaged and they rotate smoothly. That the plugs and caps are in place and not damaged. If they are, then they need to be replaced. Um, the interior of the connection must be looked at. Make sure that the fire department connection clapper is operational over its full range, the full extent. We need to make sure that all gaskets are in place and they have a good condition on them. That way that there is no leakage later on. Naturally, identification signs need to be in place. You need to know what is where and that it's all labeled. Um, any leaks whatsoever, let alone the check valve, the automatic drain valve is in place and operating properly. The fire department connection clapper is in place and operating properly. And then you want to test the mechanical water flow alarm devices. Um, if um, if you can't use the operator's test connection, you can utilize the bypass to get the flow through. Like normally you'll do it when it's cold outside and you don't want it to freeze over. You'll go ahead and use the bypass. You have to be careful though because this could trip the system and fill the system with water. And on a cold day, you could freeze the system if you do that. And then test the low pressure alarms and quick opening devices on the dry pipe sprinkler system. Verify that the pressure reducing valves are inspected and in operational condition. An inspection of the facility supply of the spare sprinkler heads to ensure that there are a minimum of 2 sprinklers of each type and temperature rating, and make sure that there's a wrench in there that you can change it out with. Um, all sprinklers, hangers, pipes, fittings, all the system needs to be checked over and make sure that nothing is hanging, nothing is broken, everything looks good. We want to test the main drain, testing any antifreeze solution, testing of maintenance valves, including pressure reducing valves, and then any sprinkler that shows signs of any of the following needs to be replaced, right? So we've got the leakage, corrosion, physical debris, anything that we know that is going to be a problem. And then the is we want to make sure that if it's painted by anybody else other than the sprinkler manufacturer, it needs to be replaced. Once again, these are all your annual inspections and testing. Which leads me to the next annual inspection and testing, which is sprinklers are installed in the incorrect orientation are also required to be replaced. For example, I put an upright sprinkler installed in the pennant position, or if the pennant, was installed in an upright position. The main drain test must be conducted annually for each water supply lead into the building water-based system. So this is somewhat new for NFPA 25, and this is a requirement as well. The spare sprinkler head cabinet needs to be inspected at least annually to make sure there's enough of the correct types of sprinklers, and we have to make sure, once again, that there is a wrench. The dry pipe sprinkler systems require additional care and maintenance to ensure that they work correctly. Once again, we're all worried about the accidental tripping, of course, with the dry pipe system, so it doesn't fill up with water. One is the partial flow trip test. We want to make sure that it's tested annually with the control valve partially open. Guidance on performing this actually can be found in Annex A, which is located in FPA 25 to go on through it. The interior of the dry pipe valve is required to be inspected when the annual trip test is conducted, and it must be thoroughly cleaned every 5 years per code. A full flow trip test is required every 3 years, or um, if the system is actually altered in any way, it's required to be done as well. Guidance on performing that can also be found in Annex A of NFPA 25. And then once again, the last thing is the air leakage test, and it's required to be tested at least every 3 years. Um, uh, and what there's one of the two methods that you can use that is outlined in NFPA 25 in the annex, naturally. Long-term sprinkler maintenance. Now, this is something that we find in a lot of older buildings, and if sprinklers that are manufactured prior to 1920 has to be replaced. Sprinklers that have been in service for 50 years must be replaced. So an alternative is to submit representative samples from one or more of the sampled areas to a laboratory and make sure that it's acceptable to the AHJ to make sure that it's okay. They're required to be done every 10 years. Sprinklers that manufactured using fast response elements that have been in service for 20 years are also required to be replaced. Um, and naturally, I don't want to go through the whole list, but there's a lot of different methods and items that you have to go through with the older sprinklers where you need to look through this list and actually make sure that your facility is up to date and correct in code. Um, the gauges usually have a life expectancy of 10 to 15 years. This is a big thing. You go into a system and you find an incorrect gauge. It can tell you the complete incorrect item for your system. And we need to make sure that those things are actually calibrated and actually work correctly to where the full scale of the whole system gets calibrated correctly and works to save lives naturally. And then a full flow test is conducted in 5 years, and was just mentioned in the last section, which now brings us to fire pumps. Now, fire pump, this comes from NFPA naturally. It tells you what the inspections, the tests, the maintenance deals are covering. This is actually in the write-up that we've actually sent in. The fire pumps have to be inspected weekly to verify that the pump assembly appears to be operating. There's no physical damage. A lot of fire pumps have an automatic testing mode, and that's usually done by the owner, either early in the morning or late at night. Um, they have to be make sure that an annual test of it is required. It must be conducted under the minimum rated and peak flows of the pump. Fire pump installations having an automatic transfer switch are also required to be tested under the simulated power failure condition. So you drop power, make sure that the paralleling gear brings up the ATS of the fire pump. The ATS can properly run and energize the equipment, and then the equipment can come up. And then NFPA 25 requires the preventive maintenance program actually is established to make sure that it's all in accordance per the manufacturer's design. PM for the fire pumps. This is all a list of items that we've come up with to tell you what this is. I've gotten this actually from NFPA, but there are several other things you can add to it. Record the system suction and discharge pressure gauge readings. Check pump packing glands. Um, on certain pumps, you've got a rope gasket that will leak the entire time, and make sure that rope gasket's okay, that everything's all right. Check for unusual noise or vibration. Packing boxes, bearings, pump casing for overheating. Record the pump starting pressures. Observe the time of the motor for full speed. Record the time on the controller, and then check for your pump run times and whatnot, and actually record everything. Keeping a record is huge for preventive maintenance. The Energen systems, any of the dry powder and dry systems are big on preventive maintenance and inspections. And the visual inspection of the system needs to be conducted per the maintenance of the owner's manual naturally. But uh, releasing a panel is powered and free of supervisory trouble, alarms, and conditions. We want to make sure that all troubles and supervisory issues are taken care of on all of our panel stuff. Manual controls are unobstructed. System shows no physical or condition or physical damage or condition. Even if it's a dent or something like that, we want to make sure it's completely safe and protected. We want to make sure the pressure gauges are working in proper range. Protected equipment or the hazards have not been changed or modified. So whatever it's serving, in y'all's case, we want to make sure that the MRI equipment is working in operating accordingly to make sure that your devices are working and protected from a fire. Provide a record of inspection and date, and then provide a record of all deficiencies. Semi-annually, if a container shows a loss of agent more than 5%, it needs to be refilled or replaced. If an agent is removed from containers during service maintenance, it needs to be recovered and recycled correctly per local codes. And local codes have that kind of stuff to them. And then verify a record of following information is located on the tag attached to each container. And we want to make sure the date of the inspection, person performing the inspection, and type of agent, gross weight, net weight, and container pressure and temperature are located on each device or each uh, container. Annual tests. Discharge tests are not required. It will not have to be performed. A service report with recommendations shall be filed with the owner. Service report shall be permitted to be stored and accessed using paper or electronic media. System hoses inspections need to be provided and enclosure inspections. And we'll get involved with the system inspection or the system hoses inspection in just a minute. The container test is not required. A clean agent DOT requires clean agent containers to be retested or replaced every 5 years. It requires it to be a complete visual inspection, and it's described in 49 CFR. Containers that are continuously in service without discharge shall be given an external inspection every 5 years. Inspection shall be recorded on the tag and a suitable inspection report. Hoses should be tested every 5 years or replaced. It says 1.5 times the pressure limit. You fill it full of water, and then the water is then pressurized, and it's pressurized for a minute, and it has to pass for a minute. And in order to pass, it must have no loss of pressure during the test and have no movement of couplings under pressure, have no permanent distortion to the hose. And these are the PM requirements that you would have for your facility. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.